Thank you. Good afternoon. I am Olivia Ruiz-Figueroa, one of the authors of EDL2 Plus, and today we're going to be looking at the EDL2 and other components that support assessing children in Spanish. In this overview, we're going to be specifically looking at EDL2 Plus and GRA2 Plus and how they work together. Then we're going to focus on EDL2 Plus and the procedure. We will also introduce two other assessment pieces that work with the EDL2 Plus. And finally, I will be working or presenting Setting a Trajectory for Biliteracy, which means working with the two languages and looking at assessment as our tool for biliteracy. We'll end with the EDL2 resources and any questions you may have. So what is DRA2 Plus and EDL2 Plus? Well, DRA is the Developmental Reading Assessment, and its counterpart in Spanish is Evaluación del desarrollo de la lectura. These assessments were developed to complement Mari Clay's observation assessment, which was created as an observational one-on-one assessment tool with a focus on the stages of reading development. The beauty of these two assessments is that they are assessments that use authentic reading. So the students are observed in the act of real reading and responding to a text. The observation of these assessments is that you are able to see the in-the-head processes as children go through a reading text. When they get to a place that they don't understand, you get to observe what do they do and how fluent these processes are. It's a tool for determining the independent and instructional level of reading. It's to form instruction not only for the individual students but for the whole class and for small group instruction as well. The program runs from kinder through 6th grade in Spanish, the assessment, and K-8 in English. So you get to see progress over time of how a child is gaining reading. It provides information to create lessons for specific needs. So you will be determining a set of focus for instruction and where to go from there. So how are DRA2 and EDL2 similar? They're similar in the sense that the format is the same and it covers the same skills and strategies because reading is reading in whatever language you do this. However, it also, EDL2 reflects what is relevant to Spanish, specifically in the area of decoding. So that is where you'll see a variation in the Spanish assessment. These assessments have been field tested in the United States and Mexico and have been used in research across the United States for over 20 years. So they're pretty reliable and teachers are real comfortable in looking at what they provide in a biliteracy setting. Basically, the assessments measure three things, assess three things: accuracy, fluency, and comprehension. Real quickly, we're going to look at just what is in an EDL kit. And as you look at this slide, you'll see we have offered quite a bit. There are the text, there are the masters that you use for documenting, and you'll have a training DVD there to help you learn how to use it. One thing that I think is important in the Blackline Masters, they have two forms. There's the hard copies, and then there's the Blackline Masters on CD. In the CD, you will also find a translation of two of the important pieces of the assessment, which is the Continuum and the Focus for Instruction. These two have been translated into Spanish so that the teachers have an opportunity to share and talk with parents about where their students are going. We've just added the plus to EDL2 by adding the EDL2 Progress Monitoring Assessment, which comes in the kit. And then the other piece, which is sold separately, is the Analisis de palabras, which is your word analysis assessment. So people ask a lot about the books and if they were translated. These stories were not translations, but were reconstructed to reflect the characteristics of text, so that they form a gradient of difficulty that reflects the stages of reading development. We wanted to make sure the stories were at the same levels in both languages and were also very easy to compare and contrast when you were looking at skills development. The stories represent a variety of multicultural topics. You will find both fiction and nonfiction in these texts as well. Now, these books have been leveled in a way to represent where you would expect children to be at the end of the school year. As you can see here, the red highlighted level is the benchmark level for every grade level. And this was developed for native speakers. So if you are a Spanish speaker and have been taught to read in Spanish, then this is the expectation that we expect children to be at the end of the year. And I say this because we'll be talking about changing benchmarks when we're talking about learning to read in two languages later on in this webinar. One of the things we had to do to accommodate using both DRA and EDL in a bilingual or dual language program was to separate the text by language. And this was to keep from using the same text in both languages. So we've chosen certain titles to represent the English assessment and then other titles that are to be used for the Spanish assessment. So how do we give the DRA and the EDL? There are 4 steps. There's reading engagement, oral reading fluency, comprehension, and then the analysis, which is done by the teacher. The procedures for all of these 4 steps change a bit depending on what stage of reading development you're going to be giving. So it changes from an emergent reading to an early because we introduce more skills and strategies as the children develop. And as you get into the higher levels, the actual responses turn from oral to written. Time on task. This is a big question. People ask, how long does it take to give? The lower level, which is kindergarten, level 8 through 3, take 7 to 10 minutes one-on-one with every student. The middle levels, levels 4 through 24, which represent most of first and second grade, that takes the longest, and anywhere from 10 to 12 minutes. And then beyond that, level 28 and above, it drops down to anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes because at this point the students are no longer taking your time to record. They are going back themselves, reading their text, and engaging in responding through writing. The analysis portion, which is at the bottom, that's your time, teacher time only, is when it'll take time for you to take the information and analyze it. So how do these forms look? These forms are set up to help you structurally walk through the 4 pieces of procedure. The first one before we start, you're going to look at the information at the top. This is where you're going to be writing down the information and then putting the final documentation of the assessment so that as a teacher you don't have to look through the pages. It's right up on the top page. The first part of the assessment is the reading engagement. And here you're going to see that we record the students' responses. At the higher levels, after level 28, the students will be responding themselves in writing on a student reading survey. The second part is your oral reading fluency. We begin by introducing the text and previewing it. We do this in more than one way. Level 4 through 16 is the picture walk, and after level 18, we just read. The student is expected to read an introductory paragraph and then make some predictions. Once you've done that, you will be doing the running record, as you can see up at the top of this page. And after the students are done with reading the text, you're going to record how many minutes it took or seconds, and then you will mark in to the graph below. It's really important to know that at this point, if the student's accuracy or fluency fall below the shaded area, you're to stop and drop to a lower level, so you don't go on to the comprehension piece. The third part is called the comprehension, which we talked about earlier. In the comprehension piece, you start off with a retelling and a reflection. As you can see here, the teacher is documenting what the child is saying, and we make connections to the story at the end. The higher levels are a written format, and the students are to look at the text, answer the questions in writing in this Folleto del estudiante, which is the student's booklet. And they're to go back, use the book to answer their questions, and just return it to the teacher when they're done. You see here, you'll see a written summary, and then go on to a literal comprehension, interpretation, reflection question. When they're done writing or when they're done orally giving you the information, we fill in what is called this continuum. And this is a key aspect of the assessment, because here's where you do your analysis. You look at each response and make some decisions on where the child falls in this continuum. You're going to see that in this case, the child had responses anywhere between an itemized 2, a 3, or a 4. Each aspect of assessment, the reading engagement, the oral reading fluency, and the comprehension, are also totaled at the bottom of each section. This will help determine whether this level is an independent or instructional level. At the top of the page, as we had talked about earlier, you're going to record the results. The oral reading fluency score and the comprehension score are going to determine whether this level is independent or instructional. And as you can see in this example, this child did score within the range, saying that level then 28 is this child's independent level. So you've really gone through the process in terms of finding the independent level. However, there's much more to the analysis than this. What you really want to find out is what the child is comfortable in doing, what they know how to do, and where do you see a need for focus for instruction. So once you've circled these choices, you're going to choose 3 to 5 teaching points to focus your instruction with the student. So 2 of the ones for sure that you would work on are interpretation and reflection, because the child scored a 2 on these. And then as you observe the child read, you were going to know other areas that you want to focus on. So in this case, the teacher chose phrasing because the child was reading along with phrases but not maybe heeding punctuation or not reading along with phrases. So whatever the choice is, you selected this for a reason. You might also choose predictions. The child made maybe 2 predictions, reasonable ones, but maybe you'd like for that to be refined. So after you've chosen the child's 4 areas of need, they're recorded on what we call the Focus for Instruction page. Now, these 2 are the 2 pages that I shared with you earlier that are in complete Spanish so that you can share them with a parent. You've also got a student book graph that then will monitor where the child falls every time you use the assessment tool. And this is very helpful over time, especially if you have at-risk kids and you need to show where their progression is going and if it's moving at an adequate pace. Now you're done with the assessment for DRA and EDL. It's been done. You have information, and this information is going to lead to instruction. You have your full entire class. These forms are in the Blackline Master so that you can document what was the independent level of the students in your classroom. And the check marks represent what did you choose as a teacher that this particular child needed as a focus for instruction. There's a lot of wonderful ways you can use this chart. First of all, you're going to be able to see any kind of small group instruction, how to group the kids, and what levels would they be on in the instruction. As you look at the check marks, if you notice the last column, there's a lot of check marks under the column of interpretation. That means that a majority of the kids in your class do not know how to do interpretation. So as a teacher, that would indicate you're going to have to do something with the whole class, do a lot of modeling or a lot of shared work with the children before you expect them to do it independently. By the same token, you may find a section that only has 2 students that need work. In this particular case, it's using nonfiction and text features. You might just want to work with those 2 students on this particular skill. Or you could also do it within their small group session. So let's look at a small group. If I have a small group that I want to do instruction with, what would I do with these children when I have them in a small group? It would be anything that has a check mark. Those would be the skills and the strategies that you would focus on and teach during their small group time. This chart is invaluable and something that I think at the end of the assessment you would truly, truly appreciate in terms of being efficient with what you need to teach and working with your students. Now that we've actually finished the DRA2, now we're going to look at another piece of assessment that was created to work with children in between the major DRA assessments. So you might use DRA2 as a pre and a post, and then use this portion as progress monitoring. How are they doing as they move along during the year? The progress monitoring material are short passages used, and during this time you'll record their accuracy, their fluency, and how they problem solve on tests. Once the passage is done, it takes maybe anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes. Once it's done, you move on to looking at some comprehension pieces. So here's your in-depth progress monitoring. You will be looking at specific skills like drawing conclusion, compare and contrast, vocabulary like synonyms, antonyms, and then particular word reading like variety of word types that are common to that grade level. This is going to be what you do in between the DRA and the EDL assessment. Again, at the end, which I really value in this assessment, is that it also provides moving you to instruction. You will see some if and then statements for each passage, and that provides, if the student is doing this, then these are the kind of things you need to work on to help the child move. Instructional guidance for reteaching is also provided with some instructional routine cards that offer concrete instructional strategies for teaching word reading, fluency, vocabulary, retelling, and summarizing. The next product with the EDL2 is called Analisis de palabras. This material, along with palabras a tu paso, work hand in hand for instruction of Spanish word work. This assessment is based on 5 strands of phonological of awareness of word work. So you start with phonological awareness, meta-language, letter, high-frequency word recognition, phonics, and structural analysis and syllabication. All of these strands are based on what kind of decoding you need for learning to read in Spanish. The tasks are all designated in your book, and you will see what you need. They take anywhere from 3 minutes to do each task. Once you've done the task, you will then record them again on a cumulative student record form. Those tasks that fall in the shaded area are tasks that need to be addressed. So you have an opportunity at a glance to see where these strategies fall and what you specifically need to work on. Again, like all the other instruments, the assessments that we've looked at, there is moving to instruction. So within that same teacher guide, you will find activities for each of the tasks so that you can begin your role in correcting and moving the children beyond this assessment. You're going to find some activities here, but also we've got a program called Palabras a tu paso. We have correlated the 30 tasks that are in the EDL2 word analysis assessment, correlating it to the activities that you find in the program Palabras a tu paso, which is the Spanish Words Their Way program. It is a program that can be used within a small group, and children really enjoy the variety of opportunities to interact and work with this material. You'll find a student notebook for the children at each stage, a teacher resource guide, a big book poem, and a Palabras a tu paso library so children can practice what they're learning. Okay, so now we have talked about all the EDL assessment pieces that work together hand in hand. So how am I going to use the 2 assessments, DRA and EDL, to set a trajectory toward biliteracy? Assessment of 2 languages, the 2 language students should provide a picture of the whole child. We must use the information gathered from both to help inform our instruction for first language instruction, second language instruction, and how to set a trajectory toward biliteracy. Both assessments were created to assess native language speakers. However, we need to begin to look at how to adjust and interpret assessment to inform instruction for students who are learning to read in two languages. So how can we use what emerging bilingual children know in their two languages to set this trajectory? Well, first of all, we have to look at research. We know that what is known and understood in one language contributes to what is known and understood in the other. So anything that if we only look at one of these assessments, then we're only looking at a piece of what the children know about literacy. In order to do this, we need to rethink assessment by rethinking it by creating what we called targeted literacy zones using the results to set instructional expectations across languages. So here's an example. Literacy Squared Research, which I'm one of the team members, used DRA and EDL to look at the relationship between the two assessments and how children are learning two languages. Using the theories of holistic bilingualism and the tools of EDL2 and DRA2, we created the hypothetical trajectory toward biliteracy for reading. This trajectory is research-based. In phase 1, we tested the hypothesis empirically on 2,000 students in the study, and then in phase 2, we tested it on an additional 2,000. So using that information, we created what we called a targeted zone. So if you have a student who I'm going to choose first grade that can read at a level 16 in Spanish, when you test them in English, maybe they came out to a level 6. What we're saying is that a child who can read a level 16 in Spanish should be working at a level 8 to 10 in English, even though their English score was a 6. Now, why do we say that? Well, that's because we already know that in Spanish they have mastered the skills, literacy skills, all the way up to level 16. Let's look at this in terms of a classroom. Let's say these are the results at the end of the year, end of first grade. So we have to look at benchmarks. And we look at the end of the year. We said that level 16 is where a child should be at the end of first grade. These students that we have circled in blue met or exceeded the level 16 at the end of the year. Except for Daniel. He's a level 14, but he's close. So what we're saying is that these students, even though their English score may have reflected a lower level, we have the responsibility of working with them at the higher ranges because of their knowledge and literacy. We don't want to hold back, especially when we have 1 year to work with kids in 2 languages. We call this their potential range. And we say that these students met the benchmark in Spanish and should be working in English at their potential range of levels 8 through 16 in English instead of their actual level. So this is the power of biliteracy, and this is what we have to begin to look at, assessment, to help guide our instruction. The second theory and shift is that we know learning to read and write in 2 languages differs from learning to read and write in 1 language. So again, I'm going to refer you back to the benchmarks that we were talking that were set for monoliteracy native speakers. So they're learning to read only in 1 language. Those benchmarks were set for that situation. We need to create, and we did, of setting benchmarks for students at the end of year expectations and what it looks like when you're learning to read in 2 languages. And what we saw was not so much a level, but we saw a range of levels. And this is what was the outcome for that. These became the end-of-year benchmarks for learning in 2 languages. So I'm going to just look at 2nd grade. In 2nd grade, the expectations that if your Spanish is your dominant language, you should be anywhere between a 24 and a 28 at the end of 2nd grade. And for English, the expectation is to be anywhere from a 12 to a 16. If children fall within those ranges, then we're meeting the benchmark for children learning 2 languages. This has been a weight off of a lot of teachers because we were trying to make them meet a benchmark for 2 monolingual settings versus learning to read in 2 languages. We need to have a new way for looking at biliterate reading development. We need to coordinate biliterate development by the grade level in both languages from the beginning of schooling. Children need to be explicitly taught how to transfer reading skills and strategies from one language to the other. And we need to continue to look at literacy results in both languages through a holistic lens. So now that we've looked at biliteracy and how to use these 2 assessments, there's some additional resources that Kathy is going to share with you before we open it up to questions.
Thank you, Olivia. That was very informative. I hope everybody feels the same way I do on that. And as Olivia said, we will take questions in just a second. What I wanted to just share with everyone as we're talking about the DRA and the EDL program, Olivia shared with you the different data that you can collect and the different sheets that you put that data on and how to group your students. What I just wanted to share with you is we do have some digital resources to help with that data management for both of the programs. We have the online management system. This is where teachers will collect the data and then input the data into the system, and then it will go ahead and save you time by automatically generating reports and auto-grouping your students and so forth. We also, this is just a couple screenshots I'm going to share with you of the teacher homepage, examples of the auto-grouping, the online continuum. So everything that you would fill out in pen and paper can be done with the online management system. There's the focus for instruction, and also provide some aggregate performance data. And then I also wanted to share with you that we have an app for the iPad, and this is a resource for the teachers. It has all of the teacher resources contained within the iPad. It takes you through the steps of the assessment. This allows you to capture all of your students' responses, record their oral reading on demand, and be able to play that back. It also is going to, you're going to score at point of use, and then it's going to capture all that data and sync it to the DRA dashboard. And so here, this will allow you to view reports and get all that information within minutes after the assessment. So it's just another tool. You can either input and use the online management system, or you can use the iPad app, which helps you to, like I said, record all of that information, and then your reports are available for you within minutes after the assessment. And so with that, I'm going to ask Sherry right now to see if there are any questions. If you have any questions, please put them into the chat box on the left, and then Sherry will go ahead and let us know if there's any questions. Again, thank you, Olivia. That was really, really wonderful and informative and just so beneficial. Hope you all feel the same way on that. And so now we'll go ahead and open it up for questions, Sherry.
There are no questions at this time. Do you want to open the audio so they can ask?
Sure. Sure, we can open audio too, and then we can give a few minutes for people who might have any questions for anything that Olivia has presented today.
Okay.
The conference has been unmuted.
Everyone is live. Please just speak out with your questions.
We'll give another minute or so if people are typing in. But
final access scores have been posted for school year 27.
I'm sorry, Sherry, could you hear that? That whoever is speaking is very broken up on our end.
It was an announcement. I think they
Oh, okay.
they remuted.
Thank you. So what I was just going to say is know that there's a lot of information presented today. If you would like any more information, or if you have a question that pops up after the presentation is over, you can call that 800 number that you see on your screen there, 866-842-7428, or you can also email learningassessments@pearson.com, and someone will be able to answer whatever questions that you may have. We'll do one last check with you, Sherry. Has anybody chatted anything into the box?
No, there are no questions.
Okay. Well, then we'll go ahead and
thank you. I've enjoyed sharing the information, and if there is anything, Kathy will get a hold of me as well if you have any questions on how to use the assessments in a bilingual or dual language setting. Thank you.
A big thank you to our presenters and our participants, and this does conclude our webinar